Okay, let's look into the ancient mystery of the moon-eyed people of North America. Article starts here with mysterious moon-eyed people, an ancient subterranean race in conflict with the Cherokee. It's kind of a strange statement whenever you realize, if you look into it, that they seem to have been driven into being a subterranean race. Or there's another idea that they came from originally a subterranean race. Some people have took some of the tales and concepts here and turned it into an idea that these people were albinos, and that they, like cave creatures, had lost all of their pigmentation and so on because they had seen creatures like that before. So strange things came out of this. Let's just look through this in an overview at first here if we can. The Cherokee recall a white-skinned race that lived on their lands before they arrived. This group of very unusual beings was known as the moon-eyed people. Cherokee legends tell of moon-eyed people were a small stature, and they had pale white skin and blonde hair and blue eyes, and they were called moon-eyed because they had very sensitive eyes and were unable to see in daylight. They could, however, see very well at night, and since these mysterious ancient people were blinded by the sun, they were forced to live in underground caves. Well, some people said that last statement, but the common statement is that they would do a lot of their farming and work at nighttime. That they could see real good at nighttime. And blue eyes are noted for being able to see more at nighttime, but blue eyes are not albinoed. What's strange whenever you look into this is that they try to tell you that this pale white skin, or porcelain skin they're even referred to as, like paper, not like normal, not like normal people that are really tan, even when we call it white, but they were real pale, and that they were little people. Both seem to stem a little bit later in the stories, in the retellings, if you will, and only show up in some of the tales, but people have taken that and formatted it out into being much more. For a lot of the tales that I see that are corresponding to these people, especially correlations from other tribes, tell you that they were real tall people. One thing that's mentioned in the description that's left out here is the fact that they were bearded. And this is another one of those weird effects, because no Amerindians have beards. They don't grow facial hair. In fact, Orientals don't really grow facial hair, and Sub-Saharan Africans without admix don't really grow facial hair. But Amerindians are well known that they don't grow any facial hair. So that's strange. And one more notch in that idea of what? Strangely, what we're looking at here is a wall, supposed to be over 800 feet long or something. Believed to have been, when it was stacked up, it was 7 foot wide and taller than a man, although it's all crumpled all down now. There's a plaque that we'll look at right near where you go to this site, and this is in Georgia, by the way. Through my research, I found that it seems that the Cherokee, well, I knew this from before, but the Cherokee came from the north down, and then they impinged on tribes that were down in that area. And that's well kind of documented too, but then what's strange is one of the things that they tell, and others that surround them tell, is that there used to be this light-skinned people that were there before the Cherokee killed them off mostly, and then chased them off into Tennessee area, and the mound builders that are there. That's another strange correlation, because we've looked at the mound builders here and up in Ohio and places, and it actually shows you that they had a connection and a civilization way of life that a lot of Amerindians didn't have. Most people don't realize, but Amerindians were not one holotype or whatever. They were very different and varied in a lot of ways. I've explained before how mythologies have gotten created, and even showed a couple of examples, and how far out in left field the reality from the little tale can be, and how little there is left to it, but the gist of the story is still there and the concepts are there. Quite often in Proto-Indo-Europeans, changing it around, instead of we came in as the Saxons and all the others that did during that time, they changed it around into a strange way of mythology of we kicked their ass. Who? They're not there anymore. Fomorian giants and all kinds of things. But there are, of course, stories of we people there, fairy mounds, all types of things like that. And because of that fact, a lot of the people that came into the Americas, which included a whole lot of Irish and people that were from that area, knew of ancient tales and knew of their folklore. And boy, doesn't this sound weird and familiar. And you're an Indian, and you're telling me there are people that used to look like us that were here, but the Cherokee kicked their ass whenever they moved down south here, and then chased them off, and they ended up in Tennessee building mounds over there. So you can imagine the interest in this at first. But when you look it up, some of these people are very discounting. In fact, the wiki page on it is very discounting. It starts right off the bat going, some say, and all this type of stuff. It seems like they're trying to be very dismissive of the whole concept. And of course, anything that deals with mythologies, people try to be very dismissive of. I mean, what are you talking about? There was these people with big old moon eyes. What are you trying to say? No, that's just what they were called, the moon-eyed people. A lot of people believe it's because they said that they came out at night. They did a lot of their things at night. Might even correspond to astrology and stuff, huh? So there was a people that were up north that were building these circles and things around on the ground that's very different than the other cultures in North America, and especially northeastern America's had this different effect going on. And there's a people that are known for, well, if you've ever seen Pet Cemetery, those circles that are in there and the concepts that go with it, and the Mandan Sioux that lived up near that area. But lo and behold, they have been shown to have been blonde-haired and blue-eyed, and a component in there that people noticed whenever they ran into them. They're like, you've got blonde-haired people in here and stuff. And it was at the first meetings. This wasn't like, oh, you know how that happened. No. If you know how that happened, it had happened hundreds and hundreds of years before. In fact, a lot of people make connections to the tales of an ancient Welsh king who sent one of his princes on a journey to come to the Americas because they knew it already existed, because the Danes and Vikings had told them so. In fact, one tale about that says that the white man had been here quite a few and many times, but the Columbus one is the first one that actually stuck. So it's a place called Fort Mountain. It's a stone fortification ruins, again here in northern Georgia here. It's a little protected site, and it's got paths you can walk all around and everything of it, and it's got this plaque. We'll read this plaque here in a little while. The moon-eyed people were physically totally different from the Cherokee, and when these two races encountered each other, war broke out. The Moon-eyed people were first mentioned in 1797 by Benjamin Smith Barton. Later documentation tells of a similar account, such as an 1823 book, The Natural and Aboriginal History of Tennessee, which tells of a band of white people who were killed or driven out of Kentucky and into West Tennessee. So, moon-eyed people. What's strange is there are tales in South America where the same thing goes on, and we find the Wari people of South America and the Cloud people that they were referred to of have a lot of blonde and red hair components, and their hair's got a little more curl to it than all the Amerindians, which seems almost as straight as can be. And they died off. When the first Spaniards got here, they said that they wondered about them. They go, hold on, who's that walking by? It was some girl with a child. She had blonde hair and blue eyes. And I said, what is that? And they said they were the last of the children of the gods. They even took some of those skeletons and put them in a museum, and you can still see them to this day with their blonde hair, and people have tried to make all kinds of apologies for that situation. I'm not saying all of these were Western European people. Some of these weird elongated heads that we find in North America and stuff, these tales of these red-headed giants and so on. Some of my videos recently showed a whole lot of hominids and a whole lot of difference going on, and not too long ago too, and into the last ice age, and weird concepts like that. And they may not be totally related. There may be something unknown. Just like Bigfoot, there may be a person in a human lineage that we don't know anything about. Like we recently found out about Dragon Man. It's kind of a Neanderthal, but he's not. A lot of people are saying, though, that's Denisovan. I always thought Denisovans were huge, and apparently that one they found's got a big old noggin on him. That goes with those big teeth and the big finger bone that they found originally, but they haven't found enough of a Denisovan type to say what it is. But now that they found the two, if they can get a genetics out of it, they could easily figure that one out, and all of a sudden the mystery's gone out of that. But you see, if the Cherokee were in a fight with these Mandan Sioux and they had this blonde, blue-eyed component, and maybe some of their leaders and elders did too, and they had different practices than them, they could make up a story where they kicked their ass, when in doubt, actually, they got moved out of an area down south. It could go a bunch of different ways, but there's also Appalachian Mountains, North Georgia, Chattanooga, Tennessee, and even Ohio we'll talk about here at the end, which Ohio is starting to get back up into that other concept of before. So mythologies are made by people, and especially in the culture that's like the Amerindians, where they tell things in folklore type situations, it gets drawn down. And within about 2 generations, because everything is taken by folklore, you can have the reality of the situation be totally lost, and now they'll believe in this story because it's been constantly told, and grandma will still tell it to you if she's still hanging around. The elders are still there. And they're 1 generation away from having known the truth in the first place, so it's gone, isn't it? Kind of scary to think about. According to the Cherokee, the Moon-eyed people lived in Appalachia until the Cherokee expelled them. The Moon-eyed people are said to have built some ancient structures in the area. One of them is Fort Mountain in Georgia. It's 850-foot long, zigzagging stone wall. It's 12 feet thick and up to 7 feet high. I had that backwards earlier. The age of the wall has never been properly determined, but according to some sources it was built around 400 to 500 AD. Who really built Fort Mountain is still a mystery. Cherokee legends tell of the ancient structure was raised either by the Moon-Eyed people or by Madoc, a Welsh prince who came to America in 1170, well predating this date. One of the videos I saw where they were interviewing people talking about this situation, these people brought it up, and they had a lot to tell you about this Prince Madoc and how he had come through and come up the Mississippi Delta type area and into these lands and took over some of the Indians there, and then living and breeding with them, hooked up with all of these different guys, but eventually they faded away or got killed off by an Indian tribe. Kind of strange. But he also said that Columbus wasn't the first one here. Well, we all know about Leif Erikson and the whole concept, but who really built Fort Mountain is a mystery. Former Tennessee Governor John Sevier wrote that the Cherokee leader Akanasta told him in 1783 that local mounds had been built by white people who were pushed from the area by the ascendant Cherokees. According to Sevier, Akanasta confirmed that these were Welsh from across the ocean. In fact, one of the things that it wrote down that I don't have here in front of me, word for word, it said that they had come from across the water, across the great water. The identity of the Moon-Eyed people is unknown. Who were these mysterious, small, pale beings who lived underground? One theory suggests that these people were of Welsh origin, being descendants of Madoc's colonists. An ancient structure almost as identical to the Fort Mountain can be found near DeSoto Falls, Alabama, and it's possible it was built by these Welsh settlers after they left Fort Mountain. There are quite a few building sites that look like stuff that we find on the Irish coast in the Americas, including root cellars and all types of effects that cannot be attributed to the local or even previous to local Indians that we know living in the area. They didn't do any type of buildings like that. In fact, they said whenever they found the buildings, they were full of ghosts and all this stuff, and they stayed away from them. One of them says they were protected by a pack of wolves that were really people. There are two Cherokee legends that could shed some light on this ancient mystery, though. One legend reveals that the Cherokee defeated the Moon-Eyed people and drove them from their homeland during a full moon. Or that placard tells you during phases of the moon they were unable to see. Now they try to twist this around in a concept like they're albinos or something, and albinos have trouble with vision in broad daylight, right? Everybody knows that, and knows anything about them, but there's never been such a severe albino that they can't stand a full moonlight like it's real bright. Another version tells the Cherokee chased the Moon-Eyed people away from their home at Hawase, a village near what is now Murphy, North Carolina, chased them west into Tennessee. In fact, that keeps getting echoed, that's where it happened at the end, but it had something to do with up north, and then they were down here, or it's separate colonies of them all, and then they got driven west, which, if you look at the timeline of those mounds that are correlated with that, it actually appears that that was going on simultaneously. So if they got ran down, maybe they were running back to their own people in some way. And I'm pretty sure through this whole time there was a large amount of contact So it's not like it would have been this didn't know or didn't understand. The way people thought just up to recently, how these people over here and they didn't know them and everything. No, just like in the Mediterranean and people growing all around, they could tell that they well knew from the farthest reaches. There was connections. There were Silk Roads well before the Silk Road. And they weren't passing silk either. According to both Cherokee legends, the Moon-Eyed people went underground. That's all we know. The Moon-Eyed people and their fate remain an unsolved ancient mystery. After all this time, we may never find out what happened to the white-skinned race because the truth lies buried somewhere in antiquity and may never be unearthed. You know, if we never get to look at any Indian mounds, it's going to be pretty self-explanatory why we never find out the truth or which Indians were where or anything, and we'll be left with this farcical idea of what we came up in the 1800s, which really doesn't have that much bearing on reality in itself either, does it? For even my father, whenever he's doing all of his Western books and studies and everything, explained to me a few different times that he knew that these Indians weren't there, and the Apache used to be over here, and this, that, and the other, and what had happened between Indian tribes leading to where they were now. So, nevertheless, the legend of the Moon-Eyed people and their encounter with the Cherokee is truly fascinating. Now let's go back from this and let's take a look at some other information in a plaque that's been shown here on these ancient Moon-Eyed people. We'll just go to images here. I could go to Wiki and show you one of them, but then we'd have to ditch out. I think I'll be able to find both of them by just simply clicking on images, which it doesn't want to go to. Seriously? Recover the webpage. And it went all the way back to where I was looking at before. So, Moon-Eyed people. And let's get an image now. So there's a lot of conjecture, and of course they try to go with some albinos, and they were some Indian albinos, because believe it or not, there are some people that are Amerindians that are albinos. And so they have this look that would have been like what they were talking about. Now these statues that are here used to be just real white, even whiter than they are now pretty much, of course, because due to weathering and age, they started saying that they look like that. They look like that. They look like that. Well, what's that? Well, it's a little 2.5-foot statue of real light porcelain granite and everything, and big round heads and big drilled in eyes. Oh, so now you're going to get this idea these people have these anime eyes and they're only little trolls and gnomes and stuff. Well, the Irish were very interested in hearing that gnome idea. But what's strange, here, let's see if we can show you a picture. They show you that they've got a bunch of artifacts around them, and there's stuff that's, that was an artifact from the Moon-Eyed people. Wasn't from any of the other locals, right? There's a lady standing next to it. You can see the look of it, and these Moon-Eyed people that are here. But those blades that are up above that, just conspicuously standing above that there, that looks a whole lot like Solutrean blades, quite a few. There's some Clovis types in there, and then some other types here, and some wide and some oddities, and they always throw that in a large selection of them. There's a huge selection part of it here that looks very Solutrean to me. What's weird about that Solutrean hypothesis is that was Cro-Magnonid type men, modern early European humans, that it looks like have come across to North America. And I've done a video where it shows the people at Smithsonian, believe it or not, have correlated enough data together and found that some of these Solutrean points that are found in the Americas were actually made out of a flint type stone that was not made in the Americas, but they find an analog for it, and it's in Spain. And that's where the Solutrean people were, and they find those points there, and they are pretty much synonymous. As you can tell, no two are exactly alike, but whenever people are making a few of them and so on, there's also a connection with them wanting to make crystal blades and put them in special ceremonies. And it's very much hard, difficult. Even if you're good at making flint arrowheads, to actually take a piece of crystal and turn it into an arrowhead. Another thing that's conspicuously telling about this is the legend behind the moon-eyed people in the Appalachians is that where you find their remains at, you find all of these crosses too. They refer to them as fairy crosses, but you can find some of these same type of fairy crosses on the other side of the big water over there. And people that believe in these things from the Wayback Machine, in fact, that symbol comes from before. See how there's not one long end on it so you can plant it in the ground and kill Jesus on it? It's just a cross. It has to do with the seasons and things like that. And I've referred before to how they may have learned things from before, but what the oddity here is that they came across it 10, 12, 13,000 BC and across the land bridge and then. But they kept this knowledge, passing it back and forth, but didn't do anything with it all the way to 400 AD, and then they started doing something. Does that make any sense to anybody? You think if I told you something now and you told your grandkids that you could keep it straight for 1,400 years and then do something about it? Pretty odd. So here's the plaque that they have out at that site there. Let's see if this one's good enough to where I can read it to you. They show you that Cherokee king, and they show you all these areas that these people are at, but this plaque right now is in northern Georgia. And this is where tribes were in North America at the time on the left. Legends of Fort Mountain, the moon-eyed people. While some legends equate the moon-eyed people with the descendants of Prince Madoc, Cherokee legends tell of the moon-eyed people that inhabited the southern highlands before they arrived. These people are said to have been unable to see during certain phases of the moon, and during one of these phases, the Creek people annihilated the race. Some believe the moon-eyed people built the fortifications that are on the mountain. Other versions of the Cherokee legend tell about people with fair skin, blonde hair, and blue eyes and beards occupied the mountain areas until Cherokee invaders finally dispersed them. Some tales said the moon-eyed people could see in the dark but were nearly blind in daylight. Other legends describe them as albinos. Delaware Indian legend tells them of their migration eastward from far west and meeting a race of very tall, robust, light-skinned people they called the Allegwe along the Mississippi and Ohio rivers. They were already there. The Delaware were stopped in their advancement by the Allegwe until they prevailed with the support of the Iroquois tribes. Both of these do correlate this data here, but they weren't little bitty people. So the Iroquois helped them out, who were also moving eastward at the time towards better and more fertile land. Some surviving Allegwe went to the Cherokee territory and stayed with them for a time and are remembered as the Tivinicula, or moon-eyed people, who were tall, fair-skinned, with light hair and gray eyes, and carried strange weapons and tools. That's odd. strange weapons and tools compared to themselves too. That's kind of odd. Here's the other telling of Prince Madoc here, and they show you a dragon flag at the top of this. This is the Welsh flag in memory of Prince Madoc, a Welsh explorer and prince who landed on the shores of Mobile Bay in Alabama in 1170 and left behind with the Indians the Welsh language. Authority is Encyclopedia America, copyright 1918, Webster's Encyclopedia, Richard Hallock in 1552 to 1616, a Welsh historian and geographer, Rapid's History of the World. Ancient Roman coins found in the forts in Tennessee. These forts resemble the forts of Wales and of the 9th and 10th centuries and of the white Indians of the Tennessee and Missouri rivers. And you can look at some ancient forts that were turned into forts for Americans. They talk about old star forts and how they had been rebuilt and redone. A lot of people are real deep into it. Sometimes I think people go a little too far. Sometimes, like this, mythologies that go on with it show you that people haven't gone far enough to look into things. I'll have to dig a little bit deeper into the Prince Madoc story and see if we can find any correlations, but one correlation that I found that someone had done and made a video about is this ancient runic writing that we keep finding as ooparts in Americas, and it dating way back and having patina on it and so on. There's a dozen of them. I don't have to name them all, but that's quite unique. So you can even see in that plaque there, they don't talk about them necessarily being some pygmy type gray alien that can only live around the moon. Maybe that has a lot to do more with astronomy and things and their connections, that these people stayed up all night because of that effect. And maybe there was a reason they were doing things at night. But these tales are concentrated in the areas in question: northern Georgia, the Appalachians, Chattanooga, Tennessee, and Ohio, where a local elder author, Barbara Alice Mann, an Ohio Bear Clan Seneca, says that the Moon-eyed people were the local Adena culture who merged with the Cherokee about 200 AD and left a remnant there. Others say a similar type thing had already happened with the Mandan Sioux, and that's what left them with blue eyes and blonde hair. You can just look up blue-eyed Mandan or something and it's going to show you pictures of it. Why don't I do that now for you? Blue-eyed Mandan Sioux. Blonde Mandan Sioux. S-O-U-I-X. Did I spell it right this time? And so here we can see some depictions of the Sioux that were drawn by adventurers here. One of these people and their astrologers had to do with these moon-eyed people. Wonder if it's all just one thing or if there's even more. Because, man, those blue-eyed people get around, those genetics, I don't know. They formed Egypt, they formed Sumeria. Did they help out here in the Americas? Well, eventually blue-eyed people got here and they turned it into what we have now, but were they here before? So you can see a few depictions that they've had of them here, blonde Sioux and things that are showing up to be somewhat different. People try to write that off and say, oh, that was because of explorers, but then because of the dating and their first contacts and so on, How early a date are you going to give? When did this happen? Or are you going to try to say, oh, well, the people from Jamestown, they bred with those people, and then when we finally met them, then that's because they already had it. And there keeps being apologetics for the idea. And of course, we can't check any Indians out. Any Amerindian is really taboo to even check anything out. There's been so many findings. There's a famous one over, not Lovelock Cave, but down in that area that shows round about the last ice age of people that were there that apparently had clothing and weaving and all type of stuff going on that predates by thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Amerindians, any Amerindian form having anything like that, the earliest forms of cloth. But then again, they found that. There's one picture you can find of it. There's a drawing of it. They can't get any genetics from it because of this rule that we have. Even though it would be just barely any inclusion whatsoever or any problem with it, that still is a thing that we ourselves gave the Amerindians. You don't want us messing with your stuff. You don't want that. It's funny how they push that into the idea. If it predates the people being in the area, what say-so do they have, really? Well, I know we're trying to keep the Indians in good standing, all that type of thing, but if we're trying to figure out the reality of mankind, can we check into it? Let me know what y'all think down below. I'm still correlating data on this a little bit, and quite often I do one like this. A few weeks later, I might find out something that, man, I should have had that in the video, and we work on our part 2. Peace.